Hello there. Welcome. You've probably come along to find out a bit more about franchising. Maybe you already looked at it and investigated, found it's a bit expensive or a bit complicated, or maybe you'd like to learn whether in fact franchising is right for you and your business. Start off by giving you an example. You may recognise this character here. This is Jim Penman from Jim's Mowing. Jim started his business in the late 80s, and it's extraordinary to see the way it's expanded. I worked with him around 20 years ago, and we helped him establish his business in Western Australia. By then he was just getting moving in the lawn mowing business, but these days he's got something like 36 groups, and someone did a calculation for me recently, determined that with his 3,100 franchises he's got around Australia, on an average of $25,000 initial fee, he's actually had an income of about $80 million. It's quite extraordinary. So Jim's just one of a number of people who started from a very humble beginning. He was a student in Melbourne, and here we are with 36 groups and 3,100 franchisees. So perhaps what I'd like to suggest is you have a notepad there, you make some notes, because we're going to move fairly quickly, and during this process you're going to probably ask yourself some questions, or maybe have some questions for me, which I'll make myself available to answer. So just ask yourself what franchise experience you have. Maybe you have just by using franchise businesses. Maybe you've been in franchising or had friends. What I would suggest you do is just dismiss all that and let's start from scratch, basically with a clean slate. The question first off is franchising right for you? Well, at the moment you've probably got a number of questions, and we hope to answer some of those for you now. One of the big things that most people in business see are the sorts of challenges, the brick walls they run into, the hurdles to growth. And typically they're often worse than they seem, but just the fact that they're there in your mind is enough to discourage you. And it's those fears, those threats, those uncertainties that tend to discourage us. So I wonder what is actually stopping you from taking your business to the next level at the moment. There are answers to these dilemmas, and one way is franchising. One of my clients, her name is Annette Corrie, she coined a lovely phrase which when she started learning about franchising, called it taking the French out of franchising, and she certainly did that. She founded her business about 4 years ago. She had no background in business, and it was all about venues. She helped people set up events for weddings, so wedding venues maybe on a beach on the Sunshine Coast or wherever it might be, and started another business as well called Circle of Love, which is all about organising ceremonies, the wedding ceremonies and so on. Well, she started a family, became pregnant in the middle of 2012, decided that in fact she'd pull herself out of the business. So what she did, she set up for sale, and she's just finalising the process now. But over her 4 years, she sold 7 franchises at $30,000 each. She had an annual fee income of around $80,000. But after she'd started her business, it was a standalone conventional business. After 12 months she thought she'd sell it because she was working 7 days a week and really exhausted with everything. She spoke to a business broker who told her business was worth $30,000 if she was lucky. Well, she's now in the process of realising quite a reasonable 6-figure sum for the sale of all these 2 businesses that she's got. So if you were in Annette's shoes, I wonder what the story would be with your business. Just put that in your mind for a moment and just reflect. Would you be in a position to grow your business, well, for her point of view, probably 6 to 8 times in 3 to 4 years? Quite extraordinary. But someone who in her case had no background, no experience in business. She learned it for herself but used the tools of franchising. So what's stopping you? One of the quotes I like from Einstein is that doubt cramps energy. When you're unsure about something, it stifles you, you get constrained, and that's when you end up doing little jobs on the side and things that are totally unnecessary. And a friend of mine I was jogging with the other day related to the marathons he runs, and saying that he hits brick walls, and what he does, if he doesn't work his way through them, he just seizes up. It's a little bit the same in business. There's some analogies. You just got to go through those walls and you get through, and before you know it, you've run your 42 kilometres. So just give you some more background so that we can help you remove some of those doubts and certainly determine whether or not you think franchising is for you. When it comes to franchising, most people will tell you it's all about documentations. and it's all about the product. Well, the truth is, there's more about it than that. And a lot of people really don't understand that it's about changing the whole way you do business, changing your vision and your structure. You need to basically have two businesses. Yours is the franchisor business, then the franchisee business model. But a lot of people who move into franchising as franchisors, particularly in the earlier years, don't do that, and they pay the cost. So it's really a fundamental vision mindset thing. What you basically do is an example of John O'Brien from Paulworks, who in 1996 started his business that he acquired in Hornsby in northern Sydney. Basically it was a warehouse, had 3 mobile vans on the road. They were called Paulworks, you probably know them. And they've grown over the last 15 years to having 300 odd vans around the country. But what his model was, he decided he was going to focus on the franchisor side of the business and basically would franchise out everything else. So what he did, you can see, basically was to establish these retail hubs. So as opposed to initially having a warehouse and 3 vans, what he did was convert his warehouses into retail hubs, and each hub had about 6 or 7 mobile vans underneath. He franchised the hubs, he franchised the vans, so that effectively in time he actually franchised the regions around the country. He's now got about 65 retail hubs and 350 roughly vans. So he had a strategy, and that's the sort of thing we're thinking about when you start applying yourself to these things. So what I'm going to do now is basically help you take that French out of franchising and try to explain to you how you can franchise your business, probably in a way that's simpler, more successful, and save tens of thousands of dollars over what has conventionally been the model. So just wonder why you're here, why you're listening to this this broadcast, what your successes in business have been, what your challenges have been. These are the sorts of things to reflect on, to see where you've been. I'm sure you had your bumps, you've had your hard times, but also your successes, because it's amazing what we can achieve. By relating back to those successes and using the power of that, that's what you need to give you the confidence moving forward. I'll just tell you a bit about my background. I was born in the UK, emigrated, spent 10 years in Africa. I had 4 businesses in Central Africa during my 20s. Arrived in Perth in 1975 with my 2 young daughters and my wife, and went into the building business here, which I'd been doing in Malawi in Central Africa. I built up a successful construction business doing high quality home developments and commercial products, mainly building one-off and spec houses around the Swan River in Perth. But in 1982 the building industry hit the wall. Interest rates for investment property went up to 23.5%, unsustainable. So I had a career change. I went into franchising and I bought one of the early stores of a group called Bedshed, based in Perth, but expanded nationally since then. Over 5 years I had 7 stores. So I became quite successful at buying and selling stores, and then started helping other people do it. I moved on from the stores and started a group with a colleague called the Franchise Alliance, and we were basically acting as brokers and then as consultants. And then we worked with a whole range of businesses, including these you see, these such as Automasters, Donut King, Ultra Tune, BB's Coffee, Pets Paradise, Jim's Mowing, and so on. And from all these we learnt a tremendous amount. We learnt there's a secret to it. You can simplify the whole process, and indeed a number of franchisors do, but we saw that a lot don't. So the opportunity we had with the privilege of being able to refine the different systems and the models and applying it to different businesses worked perfectly. So the analogy we used to use basically was you've got to get the dartboard, you've got to get the arrow in the bullseye, and your franchise package has got to be something that's wrapped and clear and very concise so that people understand what it is. It's got to be it's a marketing exercise as well as a practical business operation. So we started off half a dozen of our own franchise groups in window cleaning. We had a cost reduction franchise, retail, another one doing pick-up and delivery, dry cleaning. We franchised our own business, Franchise Alliance, and had 5 offices around the country, all franchised with people doing what we were doing, working for all of our clients, such as the Domino's and the 7-Elevens and so on. Expense reduction analysis was an interesting one. We bought that as a concept in America, created it into a franchise in Australia, and it's now in 27 countries. So surprising what you can do just for the concept. We actually franchised that as a concept before we'd even got any clients. A few years ago I moved on from those businesses. I retired onto the mid-north coast of New South Wales, started a charity called Microloan Foundation, where we provide microfinance loans to women in Central Africa, helping them start their own businesses. They get about $50, start a business, pay it back in 4 months, that money gets lent to somebody else. And while I was in that retirement phase with my wife Prue, she's also had her own career in government, professionally, and had her own businesses. We were looking what to do. We started getting itchy feet. Meanwhile, I joined the board of a not-for-profit here called ETC, and this was in Coffs Harbour, and we just didn't know where to go next. We were spending our time here. It's lovely on the beach and grandchildren nearby, but there's more to life than that. So we said, let's go back into business. And Prue said, you know what, Brian, you've had 30 years in franchising, and the analogy she used was the black box. Your head's like a black box. You've got so much information, so much experience. Why don't you use that for people's value, but apply the concept these days of internet marketing, rather than being a traditional consultant doing it across the counter, as it were, across a desk, with hours and hours and hours of people's time and vast amounts of expense. Why not actually do it in a package model where people can get access to this information very inexpensively, very easily, and do it themselves? So basically we put together the analogy of the 7 steps that we developed at the Franchise Alliance many years ago, where we have a process that we use for franchising any business. So hence How to Franchise Simply was born. I launched the business and made it known out in the world, I suppose, that I was doing it again, and I was interviewed by quite a number of journalists. In the last 12 months I've appeared in all these publications, The Age, Sydney Morning Herald, Brisbane Times, and so on and so forth. And I was invited recently to join the Office of Franchise Mediation Advisors within Australia to be one of their panel. So let's quickly run into it. What is franchising? Well, a better question I think is, what's business format franchising? Because there's 3 types of franchising. One is a product like Coca-Cola, where they have the syrup and franchises are set up around the world. Another is a manufacturing franchise like Ford or Toyota, where they create the product and they sell franchises to local car dealers. They own the franchise. They're responsible for some of the marketing, sales, service and so on. But business format franchising we're talking about is what you see in the general run of business. So that's your home services, your retail businesses, whether it's your gyms or your McDonald's. So that's the sort of model we're talking about. And when we talk about business format franchising in Australia, over the 30 years I've been involved, it's tend to grow at 10 or 12% a year, which is quite stunning when you think of it compared with the sort of growth of business generally and GDP, which runs along generally around the sort of 2.5 to 3.5%. So across the country there's about 80,000 franchise outlets. Every Jim's Mowing outlet is one, and every Macca's is one. So about 80,000, and about 7,000 of those actually owned by franchisors. Interestingly, only about 5% change hands every year, so 1 in 20, compared with conventional businesses which change hands far more rapidly. But interestingly, of those that go on the market, 3/4 are bought by existing franchisees within that group or by the franchisor, which to me indicates the strength of franchising from the point of view of the fact that people are secure in those businesses and want to retain them. There's a lot of trends out there one can follow, and I suggest you look at some of the information that's available, Googling Cordament or a Price Waterhouse Corporation, look at BRW, Ibis World. There's details there you'll see, and Griffiths University has a division that works on information, statistical gathering and so forth in franchising. You'll find that some of these statistics continue growth. Even when times are tough at the moment, you'll see as franchising is growing, depends on the sector, but between 6 and 9%. Pretty healthy if we compare how people view most businesses. So I wonder what the future's looking like for you and your business. A lot of people have their heads in the sand, you just deny the fact that things are changing. We're going through a huge paradigm shift, and if you ignore that, I think it'll be at your peril, because we haven't seen a lot of it yet of what's to happen. But what it does do is open opportunities. So if you're at the moment ignoring these things, I suggest you need to really have a look at yourself. Either you're going to carry on as you are, which I think means you're destined for possible challenges, or you may decide you want to invest in growing your business, which is a wise decision. So you may take a right-hand turn from where you are now and put some money in and expand, maybe open another branch, put on some more staff, or you can be a bit left-brained and go into franchising, look at that. So this is what we're going to run through to help you, because whichever way you choose, you need to make sure you've got a motive, you need an objective. So let's learn some more. A little bit more about franchising. What's going to give you the incentive to look at it and maybe to get involved? Well, 7 distinct advantages I'll mention here, and there are more. Number 1, you get working capital. That means every time you sell a franchise, you recruit a franchisee, you get a lump sum, maybe 10, 20, 50, $100,000, and that is mainly for your bottom line. That's net income, because they'll be paying you, you'll be charging for the training and the other costs. So once you've covered your cost of initial setup, that working capital is there for you to use for growing the business, expanding your head office, paying yourself a dividend, paying off the mortgage, whatever. A second advantage, you tend to attract quality people because people are attracted to brands. And thirdly, most important in many respects, is you're leveraging yourself out of the business because you're putting an infrastructure in place so that people are able to do the sorts of work that you're doing now as the business grows. They take on that responsibility and leave you to do what you're best at. And that is the opportunity and the advantage of being able to work on the big picture. What are those big ideas you've got? You'll find once you start franchising and leveraging, the ideas flow. But they'll also come from the franchisees. And the other benefit I mentioned is the 5th one, particularly group buying power. It's extraordinary what sort of arrangements you can come to when you're buying product when you start talking volume. The 6th one is building the brand. So the brand and the value of your business, because your business is worth essentially, what the brand is worth. It's the exposure and the value and the, I suppose, the known quantity of what the likely income streams and profit are. But one of the biggest advantages is the 7th one, is that it creates numerous exit strategies. You always need to know what's your next step. If you, for some reason, need to sell the business, or you get tapped on the shoulder if someone wants to buy it, or indeed down the track, are you going to retire, pass it on to the family, whatever it might be, you need that strategy in place. So just reflect, if you were to sell your business at the moment, who's there to buy it? Because it's buyer versus seller from the point of view of demand and value. And the more buyers you've got, obviously the higher the value. So when you look at franchising, not only can you sell to the typical business investor, you can sell it to maybe a group of franchisees that want to buy you out, maybe to one of your management team or a number of them. You get a management buyout. The other area that happens often is that there are consolidations going on in the franchise industry, and you may find another franchise group wants to buy you out. And so you go on. There's quite a list of organisations to be interested, so it increases the value. But it's not all advantages. There are some disadvantages. Number 1 is you lose your autonomy. No longer can you chop and change and do things exactly as you want, because you're under scrutiny. People are going to be looking. You've made a commitment to them. They're going to be looking for value, to see that you've provided them with the value and the commitments that you've made in the course of your discussions and your contractual arrangements. Another disadvantage that some people see is they've got to actually put the slog together and systemize and document their business. This is, producing these operations and procedures manuals. A lot of people have already got that in place. Often it's in your head, but it's not that big a deal. It's not that difficult these days with the sorts of tools you can use, like videos and infographs and recordings and so on. And the other thing is the time. It's going to take time to set your franchise up. And this will vary from person to person. Generally, I find it's 3 to 12 months, with an average being around 6 months. It depends how much time you've got available. But also, you bear in mind, you've got some responsibilities. You've got to look after the marketing for the whole group. That's a very important element in my mind. You can't just leave your franchisees to get on with it. You need to look at research and development, looking at new products, new ideas, new areas, new ways of expanding the business and increasing your franchisees' profitability, which in turn increases yours. You can look at training. making sure people really know how to run the business, and making sure their staff, their team do as well. Then ongoing support, really not just showing your face once in a while, which is extremely important, but also being there to help them with fundamental development, keeping them on their toes, keeping them up to the moment with new ideas and new products and refreshments and so on. And then their well-being, making sure that they've generally got harmony in life, and if they're suffering from any hardships, see if there's any ways that you can help. But believe me, when you look at the disadvantages and the responsibilities, there are some huge advantages. There's a group called Retail Food Group. Used to be Donut King originally, then BB's Coffee, then they bought out Michelle's Patisserie, and so they've gone. They've gone public. The board of the company bought them out and went public a number of years ago. But in 2012 they bought a group called Pizza Capers. They came from Brisbane, were established about 1996 by a couple of guys. They had 110 stores, and they were absorbed into the group. Then also later in 2012, early 2013, a group called Crust Pizza from Annandale in Sydney. They'd been going for only 10 or 11 years, run by, again, a family business, 100 odd franchises. They actually paid $41 million ultimately for that, so you can see the sorts of returns that you can get. Another client I worked with was called Speedy Lube. Doug was based in Coffs Harbour, was franchising his business, rather like Ultra Tune, but really very classy, beautifully run. Unfortunately, he got unwell and he had to sell the business. And the business broker told him that he got 50% more for the business, although it wasn't franchised, because he'd gone through and systemised and documented it. So to show you some of the advantages that you're likely to benefit from. Some of the questions I'm asked about franchising, there's a few I'll cover very quickly now. One is now a good time. We're in the middle of some challenges economically. There's no point in beating around the bush. We're not in the same situation as most of the world, fortunately, but there are downturns and there are changes. Well, the fact is, if you read the studies and you listen to the economists and you look at history, the people who do well in business traditionally expand when times are tight. The market's vulnerable. A lot of people pull their head in, they stop advertising, and really the reality is that they're in a situation where they're in denial about things. That's when you can get out there, because you can grow your business, get exposure, get great leases, great advertising, lots of good staff. There are opportunities out there at far less expense than there are during other times. Other questions that often asked is, how old does your business have to be before it's franchised? Well, you can franchise a concept. The average age of businesses are when they get franchises between 3 and 5 years. How much can you sell it for? Well, that's going to come back to your bottom line, what your return on investment is and how profitable it is. But as you saw from those points I ran through earlier, there's no doubt it will have more value than it does as a standalone business. How do you find good franchisees? Well, you make sure you assess them properly. It's not a matter of just putting on a franchisee because they want to buy a franchise, they've got the funding and they seem enthusiastic. Make sure you've got the right people. So you do a process. But there's lots of areas out there you can find them, through brokers, through online websites, through your own sources and through newspapers and so forth. And how do you work out your territories? That's something that you can't need to cover in more detail, but essentially you need to make sure you've got the numbers right so that people who have a territory have enough business potential in that territory so they can make a good living and grow. But on the other hand, they're not stifled. But then it's not too big a territory so they can't service it, in which case you're missing out on your opportunities. So these are all issues that need to be addressed, but they're not difficult. When people say, how many outlets do I need to have to break even, is one question. Well, it's going to depend on your business. It may be 2, 3 or 4, it may be 10, it may be 20. It just depends on your business model, which is why you need to do your homework up front. But I certainly know of groups like a bakery group in regional New South Wales, who've got 7 or 8 outlets, very happy, quite comfortable. You find there are people who tell you need to have 50 or 60 outlets to be successful. I think that's absurd. In time you might grow to that, but your model needs to make sure you're profitable from the beginning. So however you do it, you need to make sure you get your model right. So when it comes to business, as I mentioned, when it comes to franchising it, people will tell you it's all about product and all about documentation. Well, I've learned that there are other things, as I've been touching base on. And there's some things which are absolutely essential, no matter how good your product and your documentation are. And I think it's important to understand the reasons why a lot of franchisors aren't successful. They certainly aren't all successful. And the fact is they make mistakes, and often those mistakes, they end up digging themselves in a hole. They get bogged down. And it's because they haven't really understood the area they're going into. So the first thing I'd like to make the point about is if you're moving into franchising, you need to get a different concept in your mind, a different vision. You need a vision not just for your business, but you need to basically convert it into two businesses. You need to have a vision for you as the franchisor, and you need one for your franchisees, because you've got a different mindset, you've got different customers. Your customers are going to be your franchisees, the franchisees' customers are going to be who your current customers are. Now there's a proven process that you can use to do that. And essentially, that is the 7 steps I referred to earlier. I'll just touch base on those very quickly. So this is what I believe, without doubt, no matter how you go about it, who you use, do it yourself or whatever, these are the key areas you need to address. And I do seriously recommend that you do it in the sequence I'm about to tell you. Number 1, you need to learn about franchising. A lot of people go into franchising and don't really understand what it's about. Your business may or may not be a complex one, but there's fundamentals you've learned that basically you don't get out of textbooks and you don't get out of university or TAFE. The fact is you've cut your teeth. And it's the same about franchising. You need to learn about a bit of history, how it works, the dynamics, and the fact that the whole psychological aspect, the mindsets are quite different to conventional business, because you've got franchisees that are just as keen to grow their business as you. They're not employees, just as keen to wait till payday on Thursday or Friday and see the clock tick at 4 o'clock. Very different attitude. So you need to bear that in mind. And then we look at the feasibility study. You need to work out early in the piece whether franchising is going to work for you. You know, you have to determine the real aspects from the point of view of what your numbers are, what your feasibility is, what the likely growth opportunities are. And then building your franchise model. You've got to make sure you get your organisation structure, get your head around how you're going to restructure your business and change it. That's critically important. When you're looking as well, there's other aspects you need to consider. Developing the franchisor business first. In other words, don't go out and recruit franchisees and then muddle along. Make sure you get the structure, the systems, the processes, your team, your staff all ready before you go out to the market. Now at the moment your staff may be just you wearing 9 hats. Maybe you've got 3 or 4 people in the team. That's going to grow. But make sure that when you undertake those different roles, you do put the different hat on and you do work in a different mindset, as it were. So make sure you're ready before you start, in other words, preparation. Then you get a pilot outlet. That's when you have your first outlet. You may already have one. Maybe you've got a manager in it. Maybe you've got a friend or a family member running another outlet of your business. But you need to get one established, which we call a pilot. It's to pressure test your systems and to help you also put together those processes, because you get an independent view of the business from the outside rather than just you, where so much of it is basically resting in your head, let's face it. And so that pilot is a key element. And there's a lot of little tips and techniques in doing that, so you can accelerate it and do it quickly. Also use it as a revenue stream and use it as a way of learning so much more, so that when you do launch a franchise, you are really ready for it. So then you start recruiting your franchisees. You notice I use the term recruit. I prefer much more the term recruit, because you're actually getting people to join you almost in the business as partners. In fact, John O'Brien from Paul Works calls his franchisees franchise partners. It implies a stronger relationship, which indeed is true, but I shy away from saying selling franchises. That implies you've got somebody who wants to buy it, you've got to take their money, and they've bought it, wrapped it up and gone away. Now, your responsibilities go far beyond that. You want to make sure you're getting people with the right attitude, the right approach, and the right psychology, the right sort of mindset and so forth. So recruiting is a term to hang on to. Once you've done that and you're out there and you're getting your business up and running, and you're recruiting your franchisees, then you're really looking at the future and you've moved into a different world. I'll just mention here one of my clients in Perth, Shannon Daniels, from a business called Triumphant Property Services. He services strata title units in large blocks and so forth. He does all the maintenance work, and he's been working with me over about a 12-month period with big breaks because his business is expanding. And the reason is he's gone through his marketing strategy, worked out a lot of details together with me, going through the programs. And during that time, even if he doesn't franchise, although he's officially launched but not recruiting at the moment because he's so busy, he's doubled the amount of work he's got on. But he's also determined that by going through that process, he's increased the value of his business, which isn't a huge business, by $1.5 million by franchising just in the Perth region alone. So it's an indication of what you can achieve. So you may be at the moment at that point I referred to earlier. And if you're thinking about franchising, again, you've got three options. You can carry on, do it yourself off your own bat. You can download documents off of the internet for $100 here and there and scrounge information from other people and other franchise systems. Or you can go off and use a right-hand term, which is the conventional one of using a traditional consultant, maybe lawyer, accountancy, one of the large franchise consultancy groups, and that can cost you a lot of money. Quite frequently between $70,000 to $200,000, quite shuddering. Just the legals alone, I have many people I meet who've paid $25,000, $35,000. Or you can take a bit of a left brain approach again and have a look at the sort of thing that I do. Certainly use my processes. If you're in denial about it, you're going to muddle on, I caution you again to really think clearly before you make the wrong move. But if you do really want to get up there and grow your business, and you do want to, I suppose, achieve those dreams that you probably had when your head hit the pillow before you started your business, the way you imagined it, franchising could be the answer for you. So where do you go from here? Well, it can all seem a bit overwhelming. The cost can be intimidating. There's going to be challenges, there's going to be roadblocks in the way, things that happen. That's life, isn't it? If you don't acknowledge that, then you're probably not well placed in business. And mistakes happen. We all make slips. So what can you do about it? Well, what I've developed is a faster and simpler way for you to make it happen. And I've got a range of mentoring programs. They're all can be individually tailored to suit you and your business to help you going through that process. And they're all based on the 7 steps that I've run through very briefly here. If you do want to move forward, as I say, you have to accept there are some challenges. But whichever way you choose, you need to be sure. If at the moment you don't know if franchising is for you, the truth is, where we're at the moment, I don't know whether it's for you or not. Because while it suits almost any business, there are many people it doesn't suit. If you're not of the right temperament, if you haven't got the determination, the enthusiasm, you can't develop the ability to I suppose, inspire people to grow with you with that business, then you need to have a close look and see whether you perhaps got some work to do, some learning to do. But I've got a system you can run through which can help you determine whether franchising really is right for you. It's a process that I run with a monthly workshop. The workshops are called How to Franchise Your Business Simply, Successfully, saving tens of thousands of dollars in the process. And in going through that workshop, we run through the background overall mechanics of franchising. We'll cover in detail whether you and your business are suited to franchising. Better off to come along for a weekend and find out you're not suited than try and go into it and find it's not your cup of tea, it's not suited to you, or indeed in 10 or 20 years time say, I wonder if I could have franchised. When you see one of your competitors up there with 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 outlets and you say, well, that could have been me, well, at least if you go along to a weekend and you research it, you're going to know whether it could have been you or not. So you'll learn how to franchise your business, as I say, in this weekend, very simply, successfully, using whichever model you want. My weekend workshops are very popular. I run them monthly. They're valued at $884. They're run at a 4.5-star hotel and spa on the Gold Coast. I run them over a weekend on a Saturday, Sunday, and they are $387. Now, if you get in before the registrations, the early bird registrations are closed, you can save $100 on that, and it's $287. but depends on when you book for the workshop. But they're all available. I'll give you information where you can book and inquire more in a moment. But the 387 includes all your refreshments, lunch, a lovely function on the Saturday evening, lovely dinner, and if there are a pair of you, or more than three, more than two, you get a $50 rebate at the door for those additional guests, just as an incentive. Because I do encourage you to come along with your partner, your business partner, because it's always helpful making a decision. And if you are looking at moving into it, it obviously makes more sense if they're on the same page as you are. So if you want to register or contact us or learn more about the workshops, go to www.howtofranchisesimply.com.au. So that's my business name, howtofranchisesimply.com.au, and you'll find there's lots of information, downloads, videos. If you fill in the opt-in box on the top right hand side with your name, you'll get all my 7 steps in detail with access to a lot more information you'll find really, really helpful. So I certainly recommend that to you. If you'd like to talk to us, you can call us on 1300 960 136. That's 1300 960 136. Drop me an email if you like, brian@howtofranchisesimply.com.au, or you can ring me. My direct line's 0417 211 366, and I can run through. I've got a process I use and a form you can complete, and we'll review called Is My Business Suited? So that's something we can do in a telephone consultation. I'm happy to give you a free 20-minute consult. So I'll run through those numbers again. The website, howtofranchisesimply.com.au. The phone number, 1300 960 136. My email, brian@howtofranchisesimply.com.au. Or you can call me direct at 0417 211 366. I'm in New South Wales, so just take that into account with your time changes and so forth. Or we can have a chat as well on the phone, organise it through email, do it on GoToMeeting or Skype. It discusses your business suited to franchising. Well, I hope you found this overview helpful. It runs through fairly quickly, so you can appreciate if you want to learn more, you do really need to do some research. So get out there and look around, and certainly that's one of the reasons my site is there, to give you that information about the referrals, about my programs, about my workshops, a little bit more about my background, and you can hear from people what their thoughts and so on are. So I'd like to wrap up by saying thank you very much indeed. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this, and I look forward to hearing from you sometime in the foreseeable future.